I'm a young office worker living in the city, stuck in a monotonous routine. The stress from work, relationship doubts, and tension with my family have left me utterly exhausted. To temporarily escape all of this, I decided to spend a few days alone in a cabin in the mountains. On a Friday afternoon, I packed my bags and drove to the small cabin I had booked online. The cabin was located in a town called Radar Mountain, surrounded by thick forests and towering peaks, making it seem like the perfect place to unwind. As my car wound its way up the mountain road, I began to feel a sense of long-lost peace. By the time I arrived, the sun was already setting. The cabin, though modest, had a cozy atmosphere, with a small lawn in front. As I stepped out of the car, I inhaled the crisp mountain air, feeling reassured that I had made the right decision to come here. Following the instructions from the host, I found the key hidden by the door and let myself into the cabin. The interior was simple, with wooden furniture and walls giving off a faint scent of pine. I set down my luggage, ready to enjoy some time alone. As night fell, I lit the small fireplace in the living room, filling the cabin with a warm glow. I settled into a sofa and opened the book I had brought along, intending to spend a quiet evening reading. However, just as I was getting absorbed in the book, I heard a faint noise from outside, like something being dragged across the ground. I put the book down, feeling a growing unease. Walking to the window, I saw in the faint moonlight a few figures moving at the edge of the woods in the distance. They seemed to be watching the cabin. Quickly, I closed the curtains, trying to convince myself that they were just locals, but the doubt lingered. To calm myself, I decided to check the doors and windows to ensure they were securely locked. After confirming everything was safe, I returned to the sofa, attempting to continue reading. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I began to hear soft footsteps outside, as if someone was pacing around the cabin. After a while, the lights in the cabin flickered a few times before going out completely. The entire cabin was plunged into darkness, with only the firelight casting faint shadows in one corner. I tried to use my phone's flashlight, but to my dismay, the battery had died. Just then, I heard a soft click at the back door, as if someone was trying to pick the lock. My heart sank as fear gripped me. I didn't dare make a sound, holding my breath as I quietly moved toward the kitchen. I remembered there was a small knife I could use to defend myself. Just as I grabbed the knife, the back door creaked open, and a tall figure appeared in the doorway, holding a toolkit. The figure slowly walked into the living room, seemingly searching for something. I hid in a corner of the kitchen, watching in terror as he rummaged through my luggage, taking my wallet and some valuables. My heart pounded so loudly that I feared he would hear it, but I remained silent, paralyzed by fear. Eventually, the intruder left, disappearing into the night. I felt a wave of relief and immediately called the police. When they arrived, I recounted the events of the night. They searched the area but found no trace of the intruder, only advising me to be cautious on my way home. The next day, I packed my things and decided to leave early. On the drive back, I remembered a message the host had sent me the night before. If you have any issues, feel free to contact me. In retrospect, the words seemed to carry a sinister undertone. Perhaps this wasn't just a random break-in, maybe the host knew more than he let on. I left Radar Mountain with a heart full of doubt and unease. What I had hoped would be a relaxing trip had turned into the most terrifying experience of my life. It was a chilly autumn night when my friends and I decided to rent an Airbnb cabin deep in a forest for a weekend getaway. The cabin, surrounded by dense woods, had received high ratings, and the photos made it look cozy and inviting. We were all looking forward to escaping the hustle and bustle of city life and enjoying some peace and quiet. After a few hours of driving, we finally arrived just as dusk was settling in. The cabin was even more charming than the pictures had suggested, with moss-covered walls that gave it an old-world charm. However, off to the side, deep within the trees, we noticed an old, abandoned shed that wasn't mentioned in the listing. One of us joked that it looked like something out of a horror movie, but we shrugged it off and continued unpacking. Inside, the cabin was warm and well-equipped. After choosing our rooms and settling in, we gathered around the fireplace in the living room, sipping hot chocolate and chatting about our recent lives. Later that evening, someone suggested we go for a walk outside to experience the forest at night. It seemed like a good idea, so we grabbed our flashlights and headed out to the clearing in front of the cabin. The forest was eerily quiet, with only the sound of our footsteps crunching on the fallen leaves. The darkness felt thick, almost like it was closing in on us, and the atmosphere grew tense. "Does anyone else feel like something's off?" one of us asked in a hushed tone. "It's just really quiet. Forests are like this at night," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Suddenly, we heard a low, steady crunching noise from deeper within the woods, like someone or something was slowly approaching. We all stopped in our tracks, looking at each other, unsure of what to do. The sound grew closer, and my heart started racing. One of us waved the flashlight in the direction of the noise, but the beam revealed nothing. "Maybe it's just a wild animal," someone whispered. "There are lots of animals in these woods." Deciding it was best to return to the cabin, we hurried back, but as we reached the front steps, we noticed fresh muddy footprints leading up to the door, as if someone had just walked by. We exchanged nervous glances, but no one said a word. That night, none of us could sleep. The wind outside whispered through the trees like faint voices, but the words were too quiet to understand. Each time I heard those sounds, I would get up to check the locks, making sure nothing could get inside. At dawn, we decided to cut our trip short and packed up to leave. Although nothing concrete had happened, the unsettling feeling of being watched was too much to bear. Before we drove off, someone glanced back at the old shed and muttered, "Let's hope we find a better place next time." As we drove away, the misty fog rolled in, gradually obscuring the view of the cabin until it disappeared entirely. While no one said it aloud, we all knew that something unexplained had happened during our stay. Despite the tension, the experience gave us something to remember. We agreed to choose a livelier destination for our next trip, but we would never forget that night in the forest Airbnb and the mysterious footsteps that echoed in the dark. I rent out my beach house in South Carolina on Airbnb whenever I'm not using it. It's a modest 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house by the beach. 2 of the bedrooms are guest rooms, accessible to the renters, while the master bedroom is kept locked with my personal belongings inside. I use a regular lock and a deadbolt to secure the room, so no one can get in without breaking down the door or smashing a window. The room mainly contains clothing and other personal items, not anything extremely valuable, but things I prefer not to lug back and forth each time I visit. This happened early last spring when it was still chilly up in Massachusetts, where I lived most of the year. I decided to drive down to my South Carolina house for the week. I work remotely, so I'm fortunate enough to travel when I want to. Normally, I'd have my cleaning lady come by after each guest leaves, and the cost is factored into the Airbnb rental price. However, since I planned to arrive right after the current guest left, I decided to pocket the cleaning fee and tidy up myself. The last renter was a man named Raymond. Through our messages, he mentioned he was staying with his fiancée and asked for restaurant recommendations in the area. He seemed trustworthy. I usually prefer renting to couples or small groups of women rather than groups of young men, who are more likely to get rowdy and potentially damage the property. I started my drive early in the morning. It was a 16-hour journey, with only quick stops for food and restroom breaks. By the time I reached the house, it was around 10 p.m. I unlocked and opened the front door first, then returned to my car to grab my bags. Exhausted from the drive, I didn't even check the house for cleanliness. Instead, I went straight to the master bedroom, unlocked it, and collapsed onto the bed without brushing my teeth or doing anything else. I was asleep in minutes. After about an hour of sleep, I was suddenly jolted awake. The room was pitch black, and the clock on the nightstand showed 11:30 p.m. I wasn't sure what woke me up, but I instinctively reached for my phone and checked it for any messages. Then, I turned on the bedside lamp and looked around the room. Everything seemed normal. I got up and walked into the living room to inspect the house. As I started to look around, nothing appeared out of place, not a single pillow, not a can of beer. I checked the guest bedrooms, and both were empty. The one bed looked like it had been used. It seemed like the guests had been there and left the house in immaculate condition. Curious, I decided to check the front porch camera. I rarely check the footage unless there's a problem with the renter, but something about this situation felt off. I opened the camera app on my phone and reviewed the movement history. 3 days earlier, the camera had recorded a man entering the house using the code lock. Just a man, no woman with him. That seemed strange. I checked for any other movement between then and my arrival, but there was nothing. I reviewed the footage multiple times, but still, nothing unusual showed up. I suddenly felt a chill run down my spine. I decided to message Raymond through the Airbnb app to ask if he had checked out okay, even though it was late at night. Then, I returned to the bedroom where I assumed he had slept and started checking under the bed and in the closets. I yanked open each closet door, expecting to find something, but they were all empty. As I was about to give up, I heard the master bedroom door quietly click shut. It was a deliberate, soft sound, like someone gently closing it. I froze. I called out, "Raymond, are you still in here?" My voice shook with fear. No response. I noticed that the light in the master bedroom was still on, visible through the crack at the bottom of the door. Terrified, I got down on all fours and looked under the door. My heart nearly stopped when I saw 2 feet standing just a few feet behind the door. I immediately backed away, then hurried to the kitchen to grab the biggest carving knife from the holder, only to find it missing. Realizing I was in serious danger, I made the only logical decision. I ran out of the house and called 911. I waited outside until the police arrived. When they entered the house, they found Raymond sitting in the living room, without a knife in hand. He spoke in a thick Portuguese accent, acting innocent, claiming he just needed a place to stay for one more night. He denied ever picking up the knife, which was conveniently back in the holder. After 30 minutes of the police questioning both of us, they let Raymond go, advising me to resolve the situation with Airbnb. I was shocked and felt that the police hadn't done their job properly. Once everyone left, I immediately changed the lock code and contacted Airbnb. While I didn't get paid for the extra night Raymond squatted in my house, Airbnb did ban him from the platform. But it didn't feel like justice, not when he might have been planning to harm me in my own home, in my own bedroom.